I'm live because this is the first time I've really done it. I had two co-hosts scheduled to do it with me, but as you can see, it's just me. It's the way it goes. But I was just planning to going over as a live stream and talking live with a few friends over using Dragon Magazine as source material for the OSR, for your OSR games. Whether that be Osric, we're playing TSR era AD&D, or as I play mainly, Dragon Slayer RPG and Old School Essentials. It seems a no-brainer to me. It really does. If you're going to reference AD&D for everything and the TSR era, aka the golden age of TTRPGs, then why not go to Dragon Magazine? Dragon Magazine had lots of articles, lots of house rules, and lots of different DMs and people who run different game systems, similar to D&D at the time. So this whole concept of retro clones and stuff like that is not new. At the time, they were just parallel stuff based loosely on each other with minor differences. There was also other stuff in Dragon Magazine that I found interesting, and I'm not really sure how to share a screen and stuff. Don't really care. So I'll figure it out. I'm not really a tech guy. I also don't know how to see what's going on elsewhere. So I'm going to pull open my other stuff and see if I'm actually viewing. Well, I guess I am. I'll just turn the volume off in case there's any comments. There isn't a delay. But first off, the cover, the premiere issue, Dragon, watercolor. It's beautiful. It really is. And I often wonder what happened to the artwork. I think a lot of us prefer the older artwork, especially black and white line art. Let's get right into it. This will probably be short. This is my first one, and no one else showed up. But they used to have fiction in these too. Several items of fiction. And the first piece of fiction that you run across in Dragon Magazine was by Fritz Lieber. Pfeiffer and the Mauser, Say Their Say. It's a little over a page. It's not very long. It is a really quick read, but it really gives you an idea of how his fictions worked, his fantasy writing, and it gave you an in-depth idea about it real quick if you wanted to read more on it, which got you into reading the Appendix N stuff right off the get-go. Fritz Lieber. And since it was war game adjacent at the time, as people like to say, there was also war game rules in there. Probably why they got sued. I'm just saying, it's the Battle of Five Armies for chainmail. Didn't even bother changing the name. But that's pretty cool. And this first article is what really got me thinking about doing this. It's by Wesley D. Ives, and it goes about using non-prime requisite character attributes for abilities, using a die roll for the type of determination. Whenever a player attempts some action which would tax his ability in any attribute, generate a number between 1 and 100 and consult the table below. 0, 1 to 20, 4-sided. 21 to 40, 6-sided. 41 to 60, 8-sided. 61 to 80, 10-sided. 81 to 100, 12-sided. Using the type die called for, generate a number and multiply this number by the amount of the attribute being tested. This number is a % chance of success. I think this is a convoluted way to go about it, in my opinion. So it gives an example. Grodd the fighter. Grodd's the party has been attacked by a pair of bugbears. Grodd wants 3 of his minions to hold off the bugbears while Grodd rolls away the boulder blocking the exit to the dungeon. So will the minions fight? So he goes on, he's charisma. He rolls a 42. So 12 equals 54. 7 times 12. The score times Grodd's charisma. I don't like this. I think it's lame. That doesn't work for me. Because you know what? That's what a loyalty skate for. That's what your charisma is based on. It's a 2d6 bell curve roll. Their loyalty check, or AKA their morale check, to see if they do what you tell them to do, or if they bolt, or if they freeze. That one's unnecessary. But later in the article, it does talk about, well, it goes over the ability scores. It helps define them, kind of expanding on it, and I like that. But when it talks about everybody should go pick locks, and that is a popular opinion across the OSR, right? Just using a non-thief's character's dex as a flat percentage to pick a lock. I like that. I'm going to use that in my old school essentials and my Dragon Slayer game. The thief starts at like 25, 26 with ability modifiers of 35% at first level in Dragon Slayer. But if I'm a wizard and I have a 15 dex, I have a 15% chance. He doesn't have any special ability to check for traps outside of large room traps that all adventurers do. But picking a lock, the lock picks, and it never goes up. The thief as a specialist will go up. Same with assassin. It will always go up. But the PC, who's a wizard or a fighter who just owns a set of lock picks and looks over the shoulder of the thief a lot, because I can do that. I can pick a few locks. I can't pick a good lock. But me, this dude here, can pick a lock. So I don't think it's really super stepping on the toes of class protection to allow anyone to use a set of lock picks. Especially since it's just a flat roll versus your dex. Not an ability check, which would be like 15 out of 20. That's insanely high. A friend of mine, Oxford Gamer, plays one of my games. He was talking about how that doesn't belong in old school games. A flat attribute check doesn't belong. And I agree to a point. To the point being that for simple stuff that doesn't matter, sure. I had a thing where someone had to make a con check or vomit this last game. In addition, I made them roll a dex check simply to see if they vomited on themselves or if they could projectile vomit away from them for RP effect, comedic effect. I don't know. I just thought it was amusing. People like rolling dice. So I let them roll some dice. There were some laughs. No one vomited on themselves. Because if you're covered in vomit, in addition to the blood and gore of the dungeon, then maybe that will affect your reaction rolls later on. Maybe that will affect if the goblins run from you instead of fight you. If you have slaughtered 30 goblins in a tight room, like a hallway fight, like a Marvel hallway fight, and then 5 rounds later you encounter more goblins and you're just covered in blood, they may be hesitant. And be like, whoa, you look like a serial killer, which you kind of are. Let me scan down here. But reading through that, it's vague. I dig it. The next article in it is Magic and Science, Are They Compatible in D&D? And it's written by James Ward. So we would call that man an authority in retrospect. I'm not a huge fan. I'm not a huge fan of magic and high science. It was a big trope in a lot of the early adventures, culminating with the expedition to the Barrier Peaks, where everybody gets destroyed by high-tech weaponry and grenades wielded by powerful D&D monsters. When the Alithia can throw a concussion grenade and use a blaster rifle on you, you might be screwed. I'm just saying. But yeah, I dig it. The more I'm rambling to myself here, the more I'm upset my friends didn't show up. Damn it. Is what it is, right? I plan to do this every Thursday at 1. Go over Dragon Magazine or some other zine and how it affects. It can make you a better DM. That attribute article. Reading that attribute article was awesome. It was like, bam, yes. I'm going to expand the ability to pick locks in my party. The fiction. I encourage a good DM reads a lot of fantasy fiction for inspiration. If nothing else, to expand your damn vocabulary, okay? You have to describe things. And if you describe things always the same way, it gets stale. It gets boring. Use some damn adjectives besides very, big, dark, and dank. There are other words. Just saying. But I'm not a huge fan of this. And to be honest, I only glanced over this article because I'm not a fan of it. But you have like Charm Monster Ray, Anti-Sphere Ray, and these are all kind of funny. 10, Restoration Ray. This ray completely regenerates in being dead or dying when it always work if applied within 1 hour of death. A little super powerful in my opinion. Now, this next article is one I read twice. Languages. In the early days, there's a lot of cutting up. D&D, the brand, previously said that every species, and they actually used the word species, had a language. This is written by Lee Gold, editor of Alarms and Excursions, and it goes over languages. The rules laid down, each species has its own language, except for humans, most of which can speak common, as can 20% of non-humans encountered. And that is a rule that I don't know where I knew that beforehand, and it seems like it might be from BX, Beckme, or Holmes, or Mulvey, but somewhere in the description, there's a 20% chance that any humanoid you bump into speaks common, which means savage monsters are more literate in more languages than your brave adventurer with a much higher intelligence score. Who's a savage now? I speak 3 languages. It also lets you get the option early on. You could speak to animals and stuff. And you know, smart ass. The article talks about someone took wall as a language. I talk to the wall. No one gives you a straight answer because they're all plastered. Ha ha ha. Tongue in cheek, funny. I kind of dig it. But inanimate objects don't have a language. Extra languages may also be acquired as a divine and magical favor. I don't go that way. Personally, I don't cap the number of languages you can learn because I have met some real idiots. I'm talking about not really smart people who speak 4 or 5 languages. I only use the intelligence modifier to limit how many languages you can start the game with. But if you want to take the time, you can. Language is the main use is to communicate with other creatures. So unless your spell specifically says you speak the language or somehow conveys magically the ability to communicate the language, then it doesn't come through. And this is very important when using illusions. If I make an illusion of an orc and it doesn't speak orcish, that really undermines the illusion. Or if it's completely silent, that's going to undo it. And then it goes over alignment language a little bit, but no one uses that. All right. So I do find it interesting. And then it talks about having animal languages, like mule or whatever. And I'm like, that's dumb. And then I thought about it. You have shows called The Horse Whisperer, The Dog Whisperer. These are just people with the dog language. I mean, they don't actually speak, but they can communicate with animals. I would allow that now. I take mule. Wow, I got a mule in the party, and I need to really kind of deal with it. I want to try to pull that off this evening. I'm playing a dwarf, and he's going to be Beer Fist. He's a big alcoholic fighter cleric, but I'm going to be dragging along a mule so I can carry barrels of beer and ale into the dungeon, because these are high priority provisions that every dwarf should take. 100%. And we have an extra language slot, which I should take common. I might take mule. I speak dwarf and I speak to a mule. Kiss my ass, human. It can be fun. It can also be a problem for the party. Goes over Gen Con updates, the search for the hidden world, forbidden a funny take on how people actually play games where people aren't being serious at all. Another story, The Search for the Forbidden Chamber by Jake Jacquet. I guess that's how you said it. I don't know. I recommend you read it. It's fucking funny. I think it's funny. And makes a joke about a recyclosaurus and stuff like that. Then we go more into that war game earlier. It's split between multiple pages in the book. So it has the stats for the more the stuff for the Battle of Five Armies. Creature Features has basically a one-page ecology for the bullet, land shark. Fun creature. I like these. It expands upon the basic description in the monster manual at the time. Do with what you will. But the ecology series that comes later, right, that is born of this, is inspired by this in the first issue. You have to know your monsters. And it has a hierarchy of what the creature prefers in flesh. Horse flesh number 1, and halflings. Halflings and elves are prized. It doesn't like eating dwarves. So it makes, by reading this article, this ecology, this made up stuff about how the monster is, around, you get the idea. You may not have to roll. It'll go after the animals first. And if you want to sacrifice some horses and mules and your provisions and your baggage train, you could probably disengage and not fight it. If you fight, it's going to fight who's hurting it. But when it goes after food, there's a hierarchy of food. And guess who's not the height of the chain? The human. It will be going, elf and halflings, I want to eat those and run off. Then the humans. And then if I have to, I'll eat the dwarf. Dwarves aren't tasty. So the dwarf is going to be the last one attacked. Unless it's doing a whole lot of damage, right? And if you're a player and you know that, maybe you kind of slack. Maybe you sandbag a little bit and let the fighter take the fight. And in here, it's got mapping the dungeons. And these earliest D&D, like we have forums and stuff where we're saying, hey, I will the D&D. It was in Dragon Magazine. I actually wrote letters to some of these people back in the day asking about D&D stuff as a kid. These were dated. This is later on. Because 77, to be honest, I was like 6 years old at the time. So I did not have this magazine fresh. I came across these magazines in the early 80s. When we actually wrote a lot of letters back then. I wrote in the Dragon Magazine several times. Ads, and Mighty Magic Miscellany. And I think this is where they started adding in some new spells. And then you go over Royal Armies of the Hyborian Age editions by Lynn Carter and Scott Bazar. And it goes over adding these into your war games. And like everywhere else, the cartoons were on almost like every 4th or 5th page, which made it nice. Hobbits and Thieves in the Dungeon. Another article about the Hobbit and the Thief before they got sued. You can just replace this with Halfling, and you're reading through it. It's interesting. I wouldn't give it a high praise, but articles on more warfare articles and other games that were out at the time. The Gnome Cache is another little bit of fiction from the Greyhawk world. It's interesting. It's not that great. And there you go. Because I don't have anyone to talk to bounce ideas off of, I'm already done. A quick overview. I do quick overviews. If I had a co-host, someone to talk to, honestly, I would probably talk to them. I like to talk. But yeah, this is going to be quick. For an inaugural, I probably should have advertised. I just didn't. I said 1 o'clock tomorrow. No, they didn't come around. That's what we do. Next week, I'm going to talk about Dragon Magazine number 2. Maybe I'll figure out how to put the covers up so you can see what the cover looks like. The cover's cool. It's available on Archive if you want to just read it. Trying to track down these magazines and owning hard copies now is going to be hard. It's a magazine from 1977. They were made better then, but geez, that's an old magazine. They will not be in the great condition. So I'm going to say to you guys, I'm going to make regular videos, but maybe I'll do some more live streams. I don't know. Maybe I don't like this and I just don't do it again. Let me know if you watch it later. Let me know in the comments. Later.